Welcome to the Cows Report, the podcast where we connect you to the leaders, stories, and ideas shaping the future of college athletics. I'm Will Reese, Cows Director, and in episode 15, Ryan Bradley leads a big interview with Tulsa AD Justin Moore and New Mexico AD Fernando Lovo. They walk us through how they're educating donors, lawmakers, and fans on the new era of revenue sharing, why telling the truth about resource gaps matter, and how they're building plans to give their departments a real chance to compete and grow over the next 3 to 5 years. Then, in the Leadership Playbook, Ryan sits down with Kevin DeShazo and Seth Kindig from the Better Team. They dive into the human side of leadership in this moment, the pressure, the pace, and the expectations facing today's athletic directors. They break down why alignment and trust on your executive team are non-negotiable and how systems, relationships, and a healthy balance of commitment and contentment can keep leaders from burning out in the chair. Thanks for joining us for the Cows Report, where the conversation continues long after the event ends.
It's time now for the big interview here on the Cows Report podcast. I'm Ryan Bradley, and I'm very excited to be joined this month by two esteemed athletic directors and longtime friends of the Cows community, Justin Moore, the Director of Athletics at the University of Tulsa, and Fernando Lovo, Director of Athletics at New Mexico. Gentlemen, thanks for making time. How are you?
Doing great, Ryan. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate you, Ryan. Doing well.
Absolutely. Excited to dive in with you guys. You both stepped into the AD chair during one of the most transformational periods in the history of college athletics. So let's start there. What has surprised you most about not only being an AD, but being an AD in this moment in time in the history of our industry? Justin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think what surprised me is how few people really understand a lot of the things that we're dealing with. And not even donors and maybe some of campus personnel, which you would assume, but I think a lot of times it's even your staff in the department and even sometimes your coaches that don't really understand the intricacies of all of the new rules and what's the difference between revenue sharing versus NIL and how are the roster caps going to work. And so I think because we live in it every day and we spend so much time down in the weeds, sometimes you assume that people understand it maybe a little bit better than than they actually do. And so, again, I think I found myself having to spend more time just educating as many constituents as possible around the realities and the facts of actually what we're dealing with.
Fernando, what about you?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Justin said, but I think for me, it was just how fast everything was moving, when I got into the chair. And we don't have the on-ramps aren't very long anymore. You don't have this grace period. I remember talking to Justin when he had first got the job at Tulsa, and he was telling me about the things that he was going through. And then lo and behold, a few months later, I was reaching right back out to him and say, "Hey, you were right, man. These things come on you quickly." But we every day some rules changing this, a model's different there, conference that, whatever else it might be. And so I just think the speed of how things are moving. And then, in our chairs, we have to maintain some sense of levity, right, in the midst of this chaos. And I think, as Justin said, part of that's educating, part of that's being a leader that provides clarity to our teams, and that teams across campus and our community, whatever it might be. But I just think the speed of the way things are moving. And then, what has surprised me, and I'm speaking, to our student athletes here at New Mexico, is how resilient our student athletes have been through the midst of all this change. We've had a ton of change here in our department. I've been here 11 months and I've already on my third head coaching hire. But beyond that, we've changed a lot of our processes and other things, and our just student athletes just are so incredibly resilient. So that's been such a pleasant surprise for me.
You both came up in the industry. You've worked in some of the largest athletic departments in the country. So you're very familiar with the inner workings of an athletic department. But now you move to the other side of the desk. You're in the big chair. You're the decision maker. The old Mike Tyson quote that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I suspect you've both been punched in the mouth a time or two since taking on these roles. How has your leadership philosophy and your acclimation to being the athletic director changed or evolved, or just your perspective on what the job is versus what you perceived it to be before you stepped into the chair in the last year or two? Fernando, we'll start with you there.
Yeah, I think for me, I've had to learn to be far more intentional with my time now that I'm in the chair. The things that I used to, and Justin probably can attest to this as former football ops guys, we like to get into the weeds and solve every problem that comes up. I think we get a PhD in crisis management when you're in football ops world, but just learn how to be intentional with my time, and that helps me be a better leader because. When I do have things that I've got on my schedule or whatever else it is, I feel that the more intentional I am, the more focused I am to help provide the direction to whomever or whatever group that I'm with that they're looking for, right? Because they're coming to us in this role for answers and guidance and far more than suggestions like we used to make back in the day. And I think for me, I've always been someone that believes in transparency, but I think even more so now in this chair, making sure that I'm leading with transparency through every event that we have. And I think the more that folks believe that and understand that I'm being transparent, I try to have as many all staff meetings as I can without boring my team so that I can come to them and say, hey, look, here's what's going on. I'm going to give you a peek behind the curtain because I don't want us to operate as a department in silos. And so making sure that I'm being transparent as much as I can to develop, early in my tenure here, some trust, some blind trust. And I think with that, it'll help us achieve our goals as we continue to push forward.
Yeah, it's funny. I would have said I start the same way as Fernando. I think what is different is when you're in this chair and you can't really prep for it is your time and how you allocate your time. And so I think I totally agree there. And the other thing I would say is it's easy to get distracted because there's so many different people that are coming at you for your time. That's even a lot different than when you're, say, the deputy AD or in another role. And so really making sure that how you are intentional and how you allocate your time matches the most impactful things in the department, because it's easy to get distracted by little things here or there to appease everybody. And so I think you've got to get better at saying no. And sometimes you just can't do some things so that your time that's so important is allocated to the things that are going to really make a difference for your department. And the other thing I've learned, and I've heard some previous ADs say this, I can't remember who to attribute it to, but you have to be careful about when you respond or when you say something. People take that very differently because of the position than when you were the assistant AD or the deputy AD or whatever. And so you've got to be a little more careful and not just be off the cuff on some things, because sometimes when you say some things, they're going to take that as gospel. And so that has been different. And that's an adjustment that it's just hard to prepare until you're in the seat. It's not, you kind of have an idea of what you want your philosophy to be and what you believe in, what are your values. But these are some of the things that until you're in the chair, you really kind of have to just go through it and experience it.
Justin, you're in a place at Tulsa, one of the smallest Division I schools in the country, where relationships, alignment, resource strategy, all those things really matter, need to be handled with precision. What's something that you understand about the Tulsa job now, both culturally and maybe structurally, that you couldn't have fully appreciated when you stepped into the role on day one?
I did not appreciate how integrated with campus the athletics program is. And because of the size of the university, we're the smallest Division I football playing institution in terms of enrollment. We have just under 4,000 students. So like 1 out of every 10 students on campus is a student athlete. And so when the president and campus leadership are making decisions for the university, we're a big part of those conversations and those decisions. And so just your alignment with campus leadership is more important than I could have ever imagined. And just because in the world I came from at a place like Texas A&M, where you kind of are off on your own and you kind of run your own kingdom, and where you have to communicate, but it's just different. And here we are very much a part of the overall university, and every decision that's made is impacted by that. And so I have found myself having to spend more time really educating not just the president, but again, all of the other campus leadership on why we need to do this or how this works and why athletics is a little bit unique. And so that for sure was an adjustment. I knew it was going to be different than what I was used to, but it was hard to understand just how much that impacted the job. And so that's probably the one thing that stands out the most.
Fernando, you also stepped in at New Mexico at a moment of transition and urgency. What's been the steepest part of the learning curve for you as you stepped into the role and needed to make some decisions right away?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I was here for, I say 5 or 6 days. I forget exactly what it was. And I had to go hire a football coach. And, it's no surprise or secret here that football hasn't been successful in the last, decade plus. And Bronco that was here did a great job. And, he chose to go to another institution. And I learned quickly, very quickly, how much people care about the direction of our athletic department. And Eddie did a great job when he was here under his leadership. And so he built up a championship level type of culture. And so when there was a moment of change, I learned quickly. I heard from a lot of folks about what they believed our next football coach should look like. And then, the other thing that I learned, the state of New Mexico is both Justin and I are coming from the state of Texas, but I would say that it's a uniquely political state. As the flagship institution of this state, we don't really have much competition in the professional market here. We have, a minor league baseball team or whatever else it might be. We're the brand in this state, and that's a lot of responsibility. And the fact that Santa Fe is only 45 minutes from here, the importance from the political dynamics here. Chris Delcani at Texas, my mentor, he's from New Mexico, so he kind of warned me when I came here, be prepared for this. But it was really incredible to dive in quickly and learn how important politically, not just this university is, but specifically the athletic department is for this state. And that's a good thing because they care. And because they care, they certainly want to have their fingerprints on it. And I've really enjoyed getting to work with them. And so I had to learn quickly and appreciate how that dynamic would work and does work. And I'll be honest, I still am learning in my first year. But it's something that was a pretty quick and steep learning curve that I had to address when I got here.
Well, let's jump into those coaching searches because you both had the opportunity to hire a head football coach in your first year on the job. So, Fernando, we'll stick with you. What were, as you were going through that process, what were some of the core principles and non-negotiables that guided your search process?
Yeah, I think everything and just in our experience in football, I think Justin and myself have a pretty unique perspective on this. But, the word fit gets overutilized, I feel like. But I do think in a place like New Mexico, where football has been gone through some rough stretches, I knew that we were going to have to find someone that really fit in this community and that was able to really sell the vision and create some excitement around football. Because the reality is we were on our third coach in 3 years. That's not typically a recipe for success or buy-in from your constituents, And so I wanted to make sure that we were going to find someone that could really embrace this community, number one. And then obviously, number two, to me, it was someone that was a proven winner, somebody that had done it at a place where it was difficult to do it. And certainly Jason was able to do that during his time at Idaho and paid his dues and did a really great job there. And the type of person, it goes without saying, but someone that, you can trust, that will act with integrity. And that keeps your student athletes at the forefront. I mean, we all can lose sight of what's truly our why and what's important. But at the end of the day, I know probably Justin would agree with this. You can take a good player to a great player and a great player to an elite player if you can find that little nugget inside there to get it out of them. And I think, for me, you can only take that person to that next level if you can really connect with student athletes and show a genuine interest and care towards their development, both on the field and off the field. So fit was really important because I knew we were going to have to generate some quick momentum to try to keep this thing on the tracks. And obviously all those other things played into my decision.
Justin, what were the guiding principles in your search process?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the similar challenges that we have at Tulsa that Fernando just talked about at New Mexico. And I do think fit is critically important, particularly at a place like ours where the city of Tulsa is so relationship based and you want somebody that's going to be out in the community, spending time in the community and building those relationships so that we can get the support that we need for him to be successful. So I think the fit is important, and a lot of the things Fernando talked about are very similar. But I would say number one, was he a good person, right? Like, does he have integrity? That's always the first thing we look at. And then I was looking for somebody that understood what this job was. It's a challenging job. And did I feel like they have a plan for what it takes to be successful at Tulsa? Can they describe what their philosophy is on building and running a program that can win championships in the American? And did that align with what I believed in? And again, Fernando and I both have a lot of experience being around football programs and winning programs. And so I do feel like I knew what it looked like. And so could they explain how they were going to do that? And again, how they were going to do that at a place like Tulsa? And did I think, again, that he had the right personality to fit at the University of Tulsa, but also really the city of Tulsa? And so I felt like there had been a model of some guys who had been very successful here. And then we'd seen some types of people that were not as successful. And so I thought I had a good idea of what the profile needed to look like. And I felt like Trey fit that perfectly.
When you're going through a search process, you're getting no shortage of advice. You're doing a lot of speed dating. It can be, information overload. For either of you, was there a moment or a conversation in your search process where you felt like, I have clarity, this is the guy? And if so, what was that tangible or intangible moment that kind of created that clarity for you that this is the direction we want to
go? I'll go first. I don't think there was one like aha moment. And I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, but I've been through a lot of these football searches. And I think the thing that I've learned is the more times you can talk to the same person, the better feel and the better sense that you're going to get of who this person really is. And even if you're asking them similar questions or the same questions, and a lot of times doing it in different mediums, whether it's on the phone, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's in person, I think the more times you can get in front of somebody, the better chance you have to get who that person really is. And so as the process went on, I just kept feeling better and better about our interaction. And then I think what's critically important when you're hiring coaches, not just coaches, but any staff, is the interview is an important part of it. But a lot of times I think people put too much stock in that. And what really made me feel good was there were people in the coaching world that I knew and trusted completely that also knew Trey and could speak to who he was. And I just think that's where you're going to get the realities of are they a good coach? Are they the right type of person? And again, I think because of our background, we have relationships in the business that will tell us the truth. And it's not just I'm calling somebody who gave me their number. This is a friend of mine that knows Trey really well, and they can speak on who he really is. And so I think if you can get a great background check from people you believe in, and then it matches your interaction in the interview, that's when you feel like, okay, yeah, this is the right person.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Justin. I mean, again, fortunately, I think we've all developed relationships over the years, particularly in our backgrounds, that, we can call on people that have won at the highest level and have seen it work and bounce ideas off of and hey, check me on this, or what do you know about that? And so certainly getting that feedback helps the decision-making process. But I think for me, if you talk about, I wouldn't call it necessarily an aha moment, but when you go from talking on Zoom or the phone, and then you actually go to the in-person piece. I mean, I was really fortunate. I had a really good search group that was with me on my team, and remind myself, I only knew them for 6 days at the time, right? Because it was so early in my tenure. But they had just been through a coaching search the previous year when they hired Bronco, and so in a way that was really helpful to me, because when we went to the in-person interviews and we left that and we all went back to debrief, I was pretty convicted in my belief just in terms of how the conversation went with Jason from the initial interview to when we went in person. But then when I heard it from my team and when they were able to tell me why he would be the right fit here and what they saw in him and what they heard from him in person, I think when I put all of those things together, validation from a team that I was just getting to know and I had to trust quickly, but that knew this place. A lot of them were native New Mexicans. that went to school here, that have poured their heart and soul into this program. And so, Coach Meyer used to say there's a million coaches out there that can coach cover two or run inside zone. And we all know that, right? But what's going to make it tick here? What's going to make this create this momentum we need to see in Lobo football? And so to hear that kind of alignment from my team and that search committee, I think for me was the moment I was like, all right, I think this is right. We got this right, and let's get this done and let's get to work. So as everything, you rely on your team, but that was really important to me to have that through the process.
Both of your newly minted coaches got some signature wins early in their first season, knocking off Power 4 programs in the first few weeks. But we know that particularly in year one, there are a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes that give you a feel for, are we headed in the right direction beyond just the outcomes on the scoreboard? So I'll ask both of you, as you've kind of progressed through this season, what are the things that you have been able to observe that perhaps, your fans and your stakeholders maybe don't see every day, that have helped you to validate that we made the right decision here and we're on the right path?
Yeah, I'll go first because Fernando's, they just keep winning games. They're going to break all kind of records. We were in a position where, just being honest, at the end of last year, we were historically bad. And we were not even competitive in games, where we were losing to teams that had 1 win, 2 wins, and we're losing. It's 45-0 at halftime. We were so bad. And so what has been good to see is we went from being that bad to every game is competitive. We've won some really good games, but just watching our team play looks so different than it did a year ago. And despite not winning as many games as we would all like, our fans have been really, really encouraged, really supportive. The excitement's at an all-time high. And so that's been good. But I think, and Fernando can appreciate this, going to practice, dealing with Trey and his staff every day, the operation is right in how they go about their day-to-day business, their daily habits. And again, we've been fortunate to be around some great programs. The way that they do things is right, and that's going to work. Now it's my job and our job to give them the level of resources that they need in today's world to be competitive at the top of our league, which continues to get better and better. But just the feedback you get from the student athletes, the feedback you get from coaches and staff who were on the staff previously versus now, and then again, watching how does the program operate has made me unbelievably encouraged and excited. But again, our fans have been really encouraged, excited, regardless of maybe not winning as many games as we would like.
Yeah, and I think, for us, there's obvious, the obvious KPIs that you look for, and that's winning and statistics and all of that stuff that you said, Ryan, that the fans can see. But for me, and I didn't have much, really hardly any interaction with the previous football staff because of the change when I got here. But I know Justin can attest to this. Your football coach, when you have a head coaches meeting, they can really impact the kind of trajectory of your whole athletic department. And Jason has done a really, really good job, in the midst of a lot of change and chaos here at New Mexico, kind of inspiring the rest of our department, to want to strive for more. We're looking for ways to eliminate excuses, to chase greatness and excellence. And again, to be honest, our football program has not done that in the last decade here. It hasn't been good. It hasn't been good enough. And so to see the success and to see the way that Jason has gone about it, when he's in our head coaches meeting and he's speaking about the culture and about what he's doing and how he's going about it and going and supporting other teams. He takes his football team to go support our soccer program and volleyball. They're everywhere, right? That really helps the overall morale of the department. And then we've seen in return buy-in from our department in showing up to games, going to their games, going to tailgates, helping on recruiting visits, all of that stuff. And so when you talk about what validates the hire, certainly you can talk about wins and losses, but that to me, that's a small part of it, because we're all trying to build something, right? We're not where we want to be at football in New Mexico. We want to keep growing. And I would imagine Justin would feel the same way. But how does it impact your department? And I can say unequivocally that Jason's hire has really elevated our department in terms of our morale and our belief that we can do this. Yeah, our job's hard. We don't have everything we need here at New Mexico. We just don't. But let's not use that as a crux, because if we eliminate that from our minds, look what we can do, look what we can accomplish. And so that for me has really, really been rewarding. And it's honestly helped me do my job. And I very much appreciate that, because it could go the other way. And I think we've all been part of that at some point. But I'm happy to say that's certainly not been the case here with Jason.
You both have touched on the uniqueness of the markets you're situated in Tulsa and Albuquerque. How do the realities of your markets in terms of donor base and local partnership opportunities, the media footprint, fan expectations, how do those help inform and shape the long-term strategy you have for your department and where you need to go, where you aspire to go, taking into account that what maybe worked at a previous institution may not be the model for success in your current market?
Our mission statement at Tulsa is to develop people and inspire community through championship athletics. And we intentionally included inspire community in there because that's how important it is to the success of our athletics program. Again, we have an institution with less than 4,000 students. We have a small alumni base. And for us to get the support that we need, we have to have the city of Tulsa behind us. And so everything we do, from how we market our program to how we communicate, to the promotions we do on campus, like everything we do, we talk about how do we impact the community and how do we get the community to buy into what we do? Because again, for us to generate enough money, for us to have attendance at our games, all the things that we need, we have to have the city behind us. And so, it is as important as anything we do. And the other thing I've learned, it's actually similar, and Fernando can appreciate this because he spent time at Houston as well. The city of Tulsa has a lot of similar feels to the city of Houston in that it's a relationship-based city. And people want to know you. They want you want to go to lunch with them. They want to see you out at different events, not just for myself and our staff, but our coaches. And so the coaches that have good support, the coaches that have done well here historically have been really good at that and have understood that is absolutely part of the job at Tulsa. And so, again, it's so important to us that it's in our mission statement. I mean, we talk about it all the time because for us to have a chance to be successful, we have to have the city of Tulsa behind us.
Yeah, that's awesome, Justin, because I think that what you just said is honestly what I was going to lead with, is that, Albuquerque and New Mexico in general is so relationship driven, and in terms of, they can sniff out if you're a phony pretty quickly here, and, you can get up in front of a microphone or do whatever else and preach all this stuff that you're going to do and it matters, but you got to go do it. You got to be out in front. You got to, there's a local deli down the street, and I try to go quite often just to because I always am connecting with people and make sure that they see you out there, and that so when they hear what you're talking about and how we're trying to get them engaged, that they believe and they really get behind it, because you're real and they can feel that and they can sense that. And for us, that's been a really big push for us since we got here. Again, like we're fortunate. We've had a strong basketball brand, and the Pit being, such an iconic venue. We have an incredible base of basketball support. But when we're talking about where's our room for growth, it's football. Our attendance has been really poor at football over the last decade. And, I told my team, I said, if we're going to sit here and say, well, let's just use the same promotion we've always done and let's send the same email at the same time, there's no chance. I don't care how much we're winning. They're not going to show up because they need to be given a reason to show up. And so, really pouring into the community to make sure that, hey, Jason calls, this is Albuquerque's team, our football program. And that's really kind of caught on because, again, in our state, we're not battling all these external forces for competing for, for our time and for disposable income that our fans can come spend with us. If they believe in our vision and they see it and they feel it, they'll show up. And I'm happy to say that that's really been productive for us to this point. I mean, we had our first sellout in 20 years this season in our football stadium, and that's 99.9% because of the success Jason has had. But that 0.1% has been, I think, because we've really worked to pour back into our community. And so I love that idea about the mission statement, J-Mo. I might steal that because that is exactly for us, right? Our community, without them, we have no shot at all, especially in this state that's so relationship based and relationship driven. We got to make that a priority and make sure people understand that it is one for us.
It's funny. Our hashtag tagline on all of our stuff is Tulsa's team. So very similar.
It's awesome.
As you're building those relationships in the community, and we talked about this at the beginning of the conversation, that education process for your stakeholders or the people who you hope will become stakeholders, what college athletics looks like right now, what it takes to be successful, what kind of communication strategies and relationship building strategies have you all employed in order to try to build up not just that education piece, but get that engagement that you're going to need from those folks throughout the community to be successful?
Yeah, I think like any good communication plan, you need to have a plan for all the different constituent groups you're trying to reach, right? And those are all different. And so we have, I do a quarterly AD newsletter that's to the masses. We have, specific stuff that goes to our season ticket holders. One thing that I have done recently that has been really, really impactful, that has helped a lot, is we started doing some kind of lunch and learns where we would we started with our top donor level, and, we'd have 10 or 15 people where we, provide a lunch, and I would give a presentation just educating them on, hey, here's what the new world is. Here's kind of the landscape. Here's what NIL used to be. It's now called RevShare, explaining all that. Hey, you can actually donate straight to the university now, and going through that and then showing them, hey, here's what our plan is at Tulsa to be successful. And I know you hear all these things out there about how hard it is, and we don't have as much money as Oklahoma, and we don't. And so I think just being able to set the stage of, hey, here's the environment, here's what our plan is, here's how we can be successful. And we've gotten a lot of really great feedback. And to be honest, a lot of donations out of that, because those people want to know, when I'm giving my money, is it going to go to something that actually can be impactful? And so, and not just the money we get, but I told those people, when they're in the community, their voices have a significant impact. So just telling other people, hey, man, these guys have a plan. You know what? Tulsa actually can be successful. No, I learned all about it. They showed how we're going to do it. And so we started off by doing 3 of them, and they've been so successful. I think I'm just going to keep doing them like once a month and just keep going down the donor list and inviting people in there, because I think the more you help them understand, 1, what the industry really is, and 2, how they can help, and then 3, that Tulsa actually has a plan, that's been really impactful for us.
Yeah. And for me, when I go back to when I first started, I started in December of last year, and here in New Mexico, one of our biggest constituent groups are our elected officials. Our state is very much a part of our DNA in terms of our overall operation. And so, here in New Mexico, the legislative session is a huge deal. Frankly, I basically lived up in Santa Fe for 60 days, and that was like month 2 on the job. But I can't tell you how important and impactful that was for me to be able to go, and as a new AD here with a new vision, and I say a new vision, I mean, continuing the success that Eddie built when he was here, and being able to explain to them why their investment, the state's investment in us, whether it be through capital investments or just operating dollars, is as important as ever, and clarifying some of the nonsense, if you would, that's out there that if you're not living it day in and day out, you think you take it as gospel. And so I really was intentional about, I would legitimately, they call it the roundhouse here. It's literally a house that is round. And I would walk around and I would knock on senators and representatives' door, and I had a presentation and I would take them through that. And I think that was a really productive and fruitful 60 days because they can go down to their constituents, which happen to be our fans and our donors, right? And they can say that. And then, beyond that, obviously, we had a strong collective, as a lot of schools did. And when the House settlement was implemented, we had to quickly shift to educating our fans of this new revenue sharing. And we launched a philanthropic society to help with that. And so, I went and just did a bunch of visits and communications, whether it was in person or via email, all of those things to make sure that, again, to Justin's point, the biggest thing I feel like we're educators right now as athletic directors, and we got to rely on our teams to go execute. But if they can't execute, if we don't educate, they just can't do that. And so, having as many touch points as possible with whether it's individuals or groups, we've been really intentional about that. And I think for the most part, it's resonated, and we've seen success in terms of transitioning people into the mindset of, okay, this is what it takes to be successful. This is where our shortcomings are, and how do I impact that? And the last thing I'll say is, I think sometimes we can get shy or bashful about where our shortcomings are. I've taken the opposite approach. I've just been straight up. The reality is we're not funded at a level to be competitive. And I know the Mountain West is splitting up and there's a whole deal. But when you look at our peer group, we're just not where we need to be. And that's not a shot at anybody. That's just the truth. And, we're expected to win championships, and to win championships, you need resources. And that's my job. That's our job as administrators. But we can't, I think we're doing our fan base and our constituents a disservice if we tell them, hey, everything's okay, but please give us your money. No, we need to grow. And here's how we're going to grow. And you're a big part of that. So that's also been helpful and well received in the community.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that's the last thing you said is so critically important. And I think it has had great impact here, as well as telling people the truth, even when the truth may not be great news, but showing them here's what the market is to be successful at our level. So for us, whether it's Mountain West or the American, hey, if we want to win in the American in football and basketball, here's what that requires, just so that they know. And I think you just have a lot better chance of people wanting to support you, as opposed to just saying, hey, traditionally we need your help. We're trying to raise money. That part is really important, I think, in today's era.
You mentioned the rev share. In terms of application of the rev share, this is an experiment, right? And there's no playbook for this. No one's ever done this before. So as you're 4 or 5 months into your first go at the revenue share, what have been the biggest operational and philosophical challenges to implementing it? And how is your thought process evolving in terms of, hey, we're going to get another shot at this, a year from now, or maybe as recruiting goes, thinking about next year already, how is that continuing to evolve in terms of, hey, we're figuring some things out on the fly, and how is that informing your philosophy as you move forward?
I think operationally has not been where the challenges are. At least here, I think we have a great staff. That part has not been as challenging. I think the philosophical part and with your coaches, and I think where you have to be, again, being very transparent and honest of, we can treat everybody fairly, but that doesn't necessarily mean everybody gets treated the same. And what I've told our coaches is, my job is to give you the resources that you need to match the expectations against your peer competition, right? So when I tell our soccer coach, I want you to win the American in soccer, okay, well, what he needs to win the American in soccer is very different than what our men's basketball coach needs to win in the American, right? And so you just have to be honest and tell them that that's okay, that's different. But again, you don't need to get hung up on comparing yourself to other sports when it's two totally different worlds. And so maybe I can give our soccer program an advantage through additional scholarships and through some things that maybe don't require the hard dollars that are required for men's basketball and football to have a chance to even be successful. And I say, that's really what's fair. It's not fair to give everybody the same thing and tell football and basketball that you have to be successful when I'm not giving them enough to even have a chance. And so I think, again, being very honest and transparent, showing them that you have a plan, but just kind of continuing to give that same message and stay consistent with it. That probably has been the thing that I've spent the most of my time on, more so than just the operation of putting it together.
Yeah, I would echo what Justin said. I mean, operationally, when I got here, we hit the ground running to be prepared for the implementation of revenue sharing, right? And I was able to bring some things that we were doing at Texas that I think help inform us from the operational piece. But philosophically, I think that's where the biggest challenge for us as ADs lies is, speaking for New Mexico, we have had broad-based success across our athletic department. For example, our cross-country teams, I'm getting ready to go to Columbia this weekend. They're both in the top 5 in the country, and they have a chance to win a national championship. I mean, JMO knows, like, those are brand accentuators that you can't neglect. You can't, all of a sudden say, well, we've got to do this, or we're going to forget about that, And so managing that broad-based success across the department, while also giving our football and basketball programs the tools that they need to compete at a high level, as we all know that they generate the most amount of revenue for us. But the truth of the matter is that, we've been fortunate here to have success across the board. I mean, we finished in the top 50 in the Learfield Cup last year, and that's going to require an increased amount of resources across, whether it's scholarships or operational dollars. People sometimes lose sight of, hey, we need better, travel. Our travel budget's short, and the coach will lay out for you why this is impacting winning and losing, and they're not wrong, right? But their budget's limited, and so whether it's nutrition or whatever else, and so I think, as Justin put it, he said it, I think, better than I've heard it, is just because you're treating someone fairly doesn't mean you're treating them the same, and making sure that message is delivered tactfully and that your coaches believe and they see your actions that are matching what you're saying, especially for those sports that have competed at a high level, right? Both in your conference and nationally. That's become more and more challenging at places at our level. But the truth of the matter is we can't take a step back. And so philosophically, we continue to chip away at that to make sure that the messaging is right and that our actions match our words. And so that'll be an evolving thing, but it's something that we'll always have to keep our eye on.
Yeah, Ryan, just as Fernando said it highlighted something that I think I forgot to say, and I probably spend as much time, or it's as big a challenge as anything we just talked about, is helping your coaches understand that it's different than what it used to be. And the coach would tell you they agree that, hey, I need more resources in terms of revenue sharing or scholarships or whatever, and that's most important. And then as you sit there and say, hey, we don't have enough resources to do everything. That is the only thing I can guarantee, is we don't have enough to do everything. And so, hey, I know you want to do more in nutrition, or you want to do more in travel, and you've always traveled this way, but you have to rethink how we do things if you want to get more resources to these other areas. And so that's hard for coaches who have always thought of it a certain way and done things a certain way, that you've got to say, okay, if you truly believe that this is what's most impactful, then we have to allocate the resources to those areas. And you're not going to be able to do some things over here. There's give and take. And the change in that's hard for a lot of coaches. At least that's been a challenge for us, saying, hey, I know you used to go and fly and see all these recruits in person in high school because you felt like that was a good touch point. Hey, we're going to sign 50% of the kids out of the portal. Like, we just don't need to allocate as much money to that. And so I think just a philosophical change for a coach to think, okay, in this new era, maybe I have to do things differently, which means I'm not going to do some things I used to do. And I'll probably have as many of those conversations as any.
I'm interested to know what you all are hearing from student athletes, right? We talk a lot about the student athlete experience and putting that front and center. Traditionally, that meant great coaching, great facilities, great support systems to help them train and compete. Now you have all these other things coming into play: revenue share, NIL opportunities, et cetera. How has that evolved in terms of what you're hearing from the student athletes about what's important to them? And how is that helping to prioritize how you're resourcing your programs and those conversations that you're talking about that you're having with your coaches? or has it changed at all? Or do you feel like that those student athletes still value the things that they valued 5 years ago in terms of what's most important to them?
Yeah, I can start. I think, one of my favorite nights of the month is our SAC meeting when I get a chance to go spend time with our student athletes, and we have really good discussions in there about that very thing. You've got to a change. As I said when I first started, I mean, the resiliency of our student athletes, I think I can't speak enough about it. And what I've been encouraged to hear is that they do focus on a lot of the issues that have always been important to them and to us as administrators. We wouldn't have jobs if it wasn't for them. And so we've got to think through, how do we support them in the best way possible? And so a lot of our conversation, I would say very rarely does NIL or rev share or anything come up in those settings. It's really more so, and I'll speak to what we know we have to improve upon here is our offers nutritionally, right? We don't have a place for our student athletes to eat, centralized. And as an AD, I'm sure J-Mill would agree with this. It's hard when you don't have that, to have all those touch points with the student athletes, because we're kind of scattered all over the place. And so, those are the type of things that are, coming up. Hey, we have a full-time dedicated sports psychologist for our athletic department. We probably need 2. Do we need 3? Right? Hey, let's talk about that. Issues with travel, right? Hey, this is a problem. So we're talking about the things that, aren't what you're reading in the news day in and day out. Certainly mental health is always something that, we talk about, we keep at the forefront. But I've been really encouraged that we're talking about the things that at the end of the day, our core mission as a department, as administrators, is to provide those things that have always been important. And then lastly, I think we do have an obligation now, and I've heard from our student athletes, to make sure that we're providing with enough education now that we have these opportunities for NIL and revenue sharing, whether it's financial literacy or whatever else it is, to prepare them for that. That's something that's new. And so I think we've always been focused on educating, preparing student athletes for life after sport. But now that has been elevated to another level with the introduction of all these new things that have happened over the last 2 to 3 years. And so, I think there's certainly differences, but I'm happy to say it here that we've had those conversations at our level with SAC, and a lot of them are the things that we've always known are important to student athletes.
Yeah, I mean, almost exactly the same as what he just said. I think most people would be surprised to know how little the student athletes talk about the money, the rev share, that type of stuff that we spend so much of our time talking about or in the news. And I think the core of what our job is, right, to develop student athletes, that is still the same and will always be the same, right? I mean, we're here to educate, develop, graduate, help them become the best person that they can be. And so that part is the most fun part of the job, just like Fernando said, being able to go practice and talk to kids after the game and see them in the hall. Like, that's what is rewarding and why most of us got into the profession. And that's still, the student athlete is still more pure, I think, than people think, particularly at our level. Fernando, maybe it was different at Texas, but it's a little different. Like at a Texas A&M, the money is a little bit bigger part of it, and the dollars are very different. And you're dealing with a little bit more on that end. But at a place like Tulsa, it's still a pretty pure, heavy student athlete focused experience. And that part is actually really rewarding.
We're about out of time, so I'm going to finish on this. You guys have obviously put some building blocks in place and have a strong foundation that you plan to build upon for years to come in the way that your athletic departments mature, your teams continue to progress. If we were to sit down 3 years from now and have this conversation again, what are some of the headlines that you hope your department will have written, maybe both the public and the ones that are behind the scenes, in terms of benchmarks achieved that you're hopeful that with your leadership and your team's work, your coaches' investment, that you'll be able to have some measured benchmarks and some headlines, to some flags to plant in the next 3 years? What would that look like, Fernando, on your campus?
Yeah, I think for us, we're obviously going through a transition right now in conference. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, in this, in that realm. But I think what I talk about all the time is, let's put our blinders on and let's focus on the next 3 to 5 years. putting our best foot forward. And as I mentioned before, I was very fortunate when I arrived that, I was able to inherit a great level of success in terms of what Eddie was able to build here, and and continuing to grow on that, and competing for championships and being a program that is recognized nationally. And I know it's harder and harder and harder for us at this level to do that in this new day and age where so much of the resources and everything is so centralized at the top. But I do think there's a place for us at this level in this ecosystem. And I think it's really cool for us to tell our story that we're winning on the field, we're winning in the classroom like we have been doing. And so just making sure that we continue to do that. Obviously, we want to be fiscally responsible and in a stronger financial position. As I mentioned before, sometimes that means having hard conversations of we're not where we need to be. And when we talk about how do we all realign ourselves, we know that there's going to be something that's going to happen in the next 5 years again. And where does that leave New Mexico? And for us, if we're strong financially, if we continue to win at a high level, if we continue to graduate our student athletes, and when our athletes leave here, if they speak positively about their experience like they have been, I think for us at New Mexico, we really do have a bright future ahead of us. And it's in the most critical of times where we need to put our best foot forward so that we're prepared for whatever's coming next. And nobody knows what that is, but if we're not prepared, we're not going to be in a good place, right? So we're working hard to do that. And I'm just blessed to be able to help lead that into the future.
It's funny. We so similar. And our vision here is to be the standard of excellence in our conference because we can control that. And so I think if in the next 3 years or so, we're saying that Tulsa is consistently competing for conference championships across all of our sports, then we will put ourselves in position to have options when the world changes. And that's what we talk about all the time. Just like Fernando said, we all know something's coming in, the next 5 to 7 years, and nobody knows exactly what that is. But what I've talked about is we have to be as healthy as possible so that we have options for whatever shakes out. And so all the things that he talked about go into that. And that's our job to try to get our programs considerably better, particularly football and men's basketball, because in the reality of where decisions are made, that those programs have a significant impact. And so we focus our efforts on all of our teams, but those two particularly, getting them at a championship level in the American.
That's great insight. Gentlemen, appreciate you both. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your continued investment in CALS and the CALS community. On behalf of Will, I just want to say thanks for all that you've given back to our group. We're very proud of your success and wish you the very best as you continue throughout this 25-26 school year.
Appreciate it. I do want to take a moment and thank Justin. I don't know if he knows this, but I really do view him as someone that has always been kind of a mentor and provided me guidance with our similar backgrounds. And he got me involved in CALS. And, I'm forever indebted to you for that, Justin and Ryan and Will and everything. I think it's as great of a network as there is out there. And just JMO, I appreciate you for thinking of me and giving me the chance to join this great group. So appreciate you, JMO.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Proud of you.
Well, that's what it's all about, guys. We thank you both. Look forward to seeing you down the road.
See ya. Take care. Bye.
Welcome back to the CALS Report podcast. I'm Ryan Bradley. It's time now for a segment we like to call the Leadership Playbook. And I'm very excited to be joined this month by two members of the Better team, Better Leaders, Kevin DeShazo and Seth Kindig. Kevin, you and I have known each other for a long time, ever since you started in this business, probably, 12, 13, 14 years ago. So why don't we start by learning a little bit more about each of you, your background, your work in college athletics, and what you're doing today with the Better organization.
Yeah, great to be with you. Honored to have the conversation. Like I said, we've known each other for a long time, been in this space for a long time, doing a number of different things. And 13, 14 years ago, it was coming out to campuses like Rogers State when you were there and doing social media training for college athletes before they could get paid for it, before NIL was a thing. I was on campuses having conversations about how student athletes could use social media more intentionally. And that kind of got me a seat at the table with coaches, with ADs, with the administrators to start talking about other things that was going on in their day-to-day life, around leadership, around culture, around performance, which is really what I was interested in. I knew that I didn't want to be 45 talking to 18-year-olds about Instagram. And so started to explore the leadership space. I'd always found myself in leadership positions in growing up, whether in school or on teams or in the corporate world. And so kind of moved into this space, made the transition from the social media world, and now been serving athletic directors, coaches, departments, teams for the last 8 or 10 years around leadership, around mindset, around performance. And it's been a blast. And so we brought Seth on a couple years ago because he was doing some of this work as well. His background he can share, but he was in the basketball space. So he was just a natural fit as a teacher and a coach to bring in to expand our work.
Yeah. So I'm as Kevin mentioned, I'm a high school teacher and coach by trade, and really had two kind of experiences that led me to join with Kevin and our partner Jeremy and what we were doing. And one was basically I started a high school leadership program at the school that I was at, centered around this Giant leadership content. What we use, we partner with a company called Giant. They basically have their own version of a leadership toolkit. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was kind of the first person to go and take all of that leadership content and try to translate it into a context where a student, would be able to experience it, learn from it, and become a better leader. And then as a teacher, I was seeing such good impact in the classroom that, of course, as a basketball coach, I was using it with my basketball team and seeing that, I say at least 10x the return on that basketball floor, just because those students are opting in to be a part of that community. That in 2020, when the pandemic happened, it gave me a lot more margin. And I said, okay, I've got to figure out how to get this in the hands of more coaches. So immediately started working in college basketball. That was my wife's network. My wife played basketball at Davidson College. She actually is graduated as their all-team leading scorer, about to be inducted to the Hall of Fame, which we're pumped about. But that was our network, was kind of mid-major women's college basketball programs. And so started serving them for about a year when Kevin and Jeremy called and said, hey, we see a huge void for leaders in college athletics on the coaching side, sure, but also in the athletic department side, and we're forming a team. Do you want to be a part? I said, sign me up. Absolutely.
Awesome. I'm not going to ask you who would win in a game of one-on-one between you and your wife.
It's her. 100%. We've tested the theory. We played many one-on-one games in college, and I think she is winning the series. It's not by much though, but I also have 6 inches on her, so I have some natural advantages as well. But yeah, Understood. She wins 100%.
So you're spending a lot of time in the leadership space. You're working with leaders, coaches, athletic administrators. When it comes to the leadership challenges and the issues management, what slice of the pie or issue do you most often end up stepping into when you're working with coaches and ADs?
Seth, I'll let you go first, and I'll piggyback off your answer.
Yeah, I think so. Two things. One is we when we sit with an AD or a coach, one of the first things that we try to do is we use these things we developed called AD maps or coach maps. And what it is our attempt to take everything that they're thinking about, every single pillar, piece, branch of their program or their department that they are overseeing, and put it in one place visually so that they can see it. It just helps the conversation for them to be able to see their world. It's amazing how often just them seeing that, they go, oh my gosh, like someone gets what I'm going through. And we basically kind of go through a process of them color coding, like, hey, where are your biggest pain points right now? And what we've learned through doing that over and over and over again, we've done that with different coaches and ADs probably well over 100 times, is that a lot of ADs and coaches think that leadership is, we call it one slice of the pie. Like you said, it is a slice of the pie. That leadership is one of the things they do. It's one of the things they need to be thinking about, right? If I'm an AD and I'm running a big time Power 4 athletic department, I know that leadership is an important thing in my department, but they see it as one of those branches of all of the different things that they're doing. And so one of the first things that we try to do is help them see that, no, we actually see it a little bit differently. We see leadership as what we call the pie crust, that if this is your world, here is all of the branches of all the things you're thinking about in your program and your department, that actually like your leadership first of yourself is the foundation that all the rest of this stuff is built on. It's not one slice of the pie. It's not something you should be, trying to carve out time for. It is happening that way, where your leadership first of yourself, then of others, is the foundation of everything else. And so I would say that one of the biggest kind of, things that we always are evangelizing is that idea that like, hey, your leadership of yourself first matters so much to your organization that we almost have to preach that message to help ADs in the first place understand that, okay, well, what am I doing to lead myself? What if this is the foundation, what is that foundation? And so much of that comes down to the person that they are. But I would say that's the first conversation we're most often having with these leaders.
Yeah, and I think 1B is the development of their coaches. You can include all leadership and staff, but we hire coaches, and I think we just by default think that coaches are unbelievable leaders when coaches know the sport, right? They know the X's and O's, and obviously they're always looking for ways to grow in the X's and O's and the day-to-day tactics of how they coach a sport, but they're not inherently good leaders, and so we hire them and expect them to be successful. We throw all these things at them, now, and in today's world, most of them aren't even coaching, right? Coaching is like the fifth thing on the list of what they get to do because now it's fundraising and it's all these other things. But I think the leadership development of their coaches and how do we develop coaches as performers, not just on field, on court performance, but their own leadership performance. To say if we're gonna bring you in, we actually need to make sure we're setting you up for success. And success is not all the resources of the program; it's how we're actually going to develop you as a person.
That's good. All right, we have a lot of young and middle career athletic administrators in the CALS community. When it comes to developing a leadership mindset, where's the best place for that group to start?
That's a great question. Developing a leadership mindset. I think it's really important for a young leader to start thinking about their leadership philosophy, right? So what does leadership mean to me? And I think, Ren Baker, friend of the program, told this story at CALS, and it's I'd never heard him tell this story before, but I thought it was incredible. So I'll quickly recap it. He said he was coaching at Rogers State, and he had been on Eddie Sutton's staff at Oklahoma State. Was he a GA for Eddie?
And then he worked in basketball operations.
Yeah. Okay. And so now he's coaching at Rogers State, and again, he had been under a legend, absolute legend of the game, and he's super frustrated trying to now coach and figure this thing out. So he calls James Dickey, another veteran who had been a head coach at a number of places and was on Eddie's staff for a while. And he's super frustrated. And James Dickey said, well, Ren, have you ever considered that you're not Eddie Sutton? You're Ren Baker. And I think so many leaders fall into the trap of trying to be like fill in the blank. Well, this leader is very respected in the industry, or I've worked for this leader. I need to be like them. And you're not them, right? You're going to be a very average version of them, and you're going to frustrate yourself and everybody around you. And so I think for a I won't say necessarily a young leader, but for someone who's preparing to kind of be in that AD chair to think, what is my leadership philosophy? What are my values? I can learn and pull from leaders that I've worked for or leaders that I've observed, or if I've sat at CALS and listened to these legends of the industry talk about leadership, how can I take what they've done and say, that's awesome, but here's my personality. Here are my strengths and weaknesses. How do I actually make that mine? And so I think coming into those roles with a high level of self-awareness of who they are and of who they are not will help them be successful.
And I think to that point, doing it through the lens of not just adopting other people's ideas. So like so much of when we ask a leader, hey, what is your process for developing that? If you're going to have your own leadership style, your own voice, like what are you doing to do that? They're always going to mention a person that they are trying to basically copy, kind of like what Kevin is saying, or a book or a couple of big picture ideas. And so the other thing I would say to those leaders is you don't settle for ideas that just live up here. What are the systems? That's the language that we use, is what are the systems you're developing in your leadership day to day? The small disciplines you are doing every single day that first helps you find that voice. What is it? Increase your self-awareness, like Kevin said, but then also live through it every day. What data are you collecting on yourself? That I think that's kind of become one of our calling cards, so to speak, is like we're never here to like push an idea or content on anybody, because what we found is, especially on the coaching space, but it's definitely true of athletic directors as well, like they don't need more access to ideas or leadership content. It's just there's mountains of it out there. Where we really feel like leaders are struggling for the most part is taking those things that they resonate with, those ideas that really like they're like, okay, this is something I want to plant my flag of my leadership in and actually implement it, but how do I actually implement it? And so I think it's not just settling for what are those big picture ideas, not just settling for like, okay, here's a here's a value that I have, but what are the systems you're building into your leadership every day? One, to find your voice first, and then to make sure that you're living through it and being the leader that is worth following, and that having an awareness of the leader that other people are experiencing every day.
And I want to give you a chance to unpack that a little bit more. So let's frame it this way. We've got a lot of mid-career folks that are part of our audience who maybe are in management roles for the first time, aspiring to move up into that C-suite within an athletic department. As those folks are progressing in their career, how would you come alongside them and encourage them and maybe put some tangible systems around them to help them become more effective leaders and continue to grow in their leadership capacity?
Seth, go for it.
Yeah, I think it's a few things. So we'll talk the way I like to talk big picture, and then I'll talk about it like a funnel. So we'll get more and more specific as we go. And then Kevin, jump in whenever. But I think big picture. So like talking inside baseball about systems and how to develop them in your leadership is big picture. You have to start collecting some form of data on yourself. Okay. So better. We have tons of tools that we really like and we think are really good at doing that. But you don't have to use ours. And there are tons of other people that have tools that are just as good, if not better than the ones we use. So no matter what those tools are, again, or those, leadership principles, values, the things that you're reading in books and leadership books that you really want to be about, I think the big picture idea is, okay, well, what are you doing to collect data on yourself to really see if you are living those things out? And so one of the big picture ones that's not really specific to a tool that I'll often talk about is just pick 3 values. What are the 3 things that you want people to experience in your leadership every day? And literally just do a 1 to 5 scale at the end of every day. It can be after meetings, so it could be like an after action report. It could be at the end of the day. If there's a high pressure situation in your leadership that you need to evaluate, it could be right after that. We think it's best when when the wound is most fresh, like if something didn't go as well, or if something did go as well, it's best to score yourself, but just score yourself 1 to 5. How well do I feel like I did? Is it the best measure? No. The best measure would be who else was in that meeting? Let's have them score you as well, right? But having some data on yourself is so much better than nothing. And so I think like big picture before we kind of tighten the funnel, and Kevin, I'll kick it to you to kind of talk about some of those other things that we do. But I think that's just a huge leadership hack that we often talk about is what are you doing to collect data on yourself so that you at least have something to base your leadership off of that you can then, it'll increase your awareness. It'll increase the rate at which you're building awareness on, okay, well, what are the things I need to work on? What are the things I'm good at? What are the blind spots? Is big picture, start collecting data on yourself.
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to butcher this stat, Seth, you'll probably remember it because it was in the newsletter we sent a couple of weeks ago because we talk about self-awareness being such a critical part of leadership. And there was some stat like 95% of people think that they're self-aware, and it was like 12% of people actually are self-aware.
Yeah, you were close. It was 13. Yeah, it was good.
There we go. Yes. Just make up numbers, but close enough. But it's this idea of, we talk a lot about the idea of leadership intelligence. And you can't change what you're unaware of. And so to lead intelligently means you have to be reflecting, okay, well, how am I doing? And again, there's no perfect system, but to have some form of reflection to say, and I wasn't present in that meeting. Why? I wasn't engaged in that meeting. Why? I lost my temper in that meeting. Why? I was distracted in that meeting. Why? Well, I'm going to be with this person. I'm always struggling. Why? Okay, well, I'm going to have to deal with them again. How can I be better the next time? If I'm living my values, what would that version of me look like? Just like we would do with an athlete, right? When you're preparing to perform, you're visualizing, how am I going to be on the golf course or on a football field? It's no different with leadership. And so you're evaluating and measuring yourself. Otherwise, it is the definition of insanity, right? You're going to keep doing the same things you've always done and wondering why you're not getting influence, wondering why your staff isn't aligned, wondering why you're not making progress. It's like, well, we view performance as always downstream of leadership. So if you're having performance problems in your organization, it's because you have a leadership problem. And the only person who can change the leadership problem is you. And so you evaluating yourself on a consistent basis. And yes, if I'm a leader listening to this, I'm like, this sounds like it takes time. It does take time. But we always say, where do you want to spend your time? You can spend it on the front end, trying to be self-aware, trying to reflect, trying to visualize, trying to make plans, trying to grow. Or you can spend that time on the back end dealing with the consequences of not doing those things. And now you've got a disconnected staff, you've got resentment, you've got bitterness, you've got burnout. And so you can build bridges with people, or you can spend your time putting out fires with people. And so it's, where do you want to spend that time? I prefer to spend it on the front end, even if it does take a little more intentionality, to give myself a better chance of success on the back end.
we spend a lot of time on this podcast talking to sitting athletic directors and kind of walking through their career journey. And really, I like to really dial in on that transition from that deputy AD role to sitting in the chair for the first time, and kind of everything that comes at you and the paradigm shift that occurs there. As you guys are coming alongside some of these ADs and talking with them and helping them navigate the challenges, what do you think are some of the overlooked issues that soon to be ADs, those aspiring ADs, maybe aren't fully aware of yet, that they need to be more aware of and begin to equip themselves for, because it's going to hit them in the face when they step into the chair?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's almost like becoming a parent, or if you are a parent, having a second kid. Because before you have kids, you're like, I'm so busy. This is crazy. And then you have a kid, you're like, wait a minute. I actually had so much free time. How did I think that I was busy? This is busy. Then you have a second kid, you're like, wait a minute. With one kid, I had all the time in the world. And it's the same thing if you're going from deputy AD to AD. It's like you're just seeing, you think you're seeing everything, but you're just seeing a part of the world, and you're responsible for a part of the world. And it could be a big part of the world, but you're only responsible for a part of the world. And then you step into that chair and it's like, oh, now it's everything. So you don't realize the bigness of the role. Even if you thought you did, it's always different when you get in the chair. You're like, wait a minute. I actually had a lot of time when I was just a deputy AD. Now I'm responsible for everything. And so one, I think the bigness of the role, but I think two, it's the misconception that you're responsible for everything, or that you're responsible for directly leading everyone. And so if you're doesn't matter the size organization, it could be a 50-person athletic department, it could be a 300-person athletic department. You're not responsible for formally leading every one of those people. I always joke that Jesus stopped at 12. So you can't lead every person in that organization. You are directly, formally responsible for your executive staff, and being so intentional with how you lead them. There's informal leadership with everybody else, right? There's relationship, there's touching base, there's connecting, but your executive staff is then directly responsible for those below them, and you multiply intentionally. But I think realizing, okay, if I pour myself into my executive staff and making sure we're connected, we're aligned, we have relationship, we have trust, the fundraising part gets easier, the donor part, or the board part gets easier, the hiring part gets easier. All the things that you have to deal with are a whole lot easier if you focus on developing connections and relationship with your staff first. Because all those other things you can figure out. It's not rocket science. But if you start with all the external stuff first, which are important, but you ignore your staff thinking, well, we'll figure it out along the way, you're just fracturing. And there are little cracks that in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months become huge fractures. It's like, oh, if I just invested in my people first that are closest to me, we could have tackled all these things together instead of it all, me believing falsely that it all falls on my shoulders. Seth, what would you add?
Yeah, no, I think you set it up well. I'm sitting here laughing to myself because it's interesting. I'd be curious to know what you think, Brian, but I think this is sometimes a terrible question to ask a sitting AD, because their problems are always going to be people 100% of the time, but they can't really tell on themselves when they're sitting AD because they're going to be telling on their people, right? So they can't make their people look bad. So they kind of give you some answer. You have to get them in like one-on-one settings, I think, when maybe they'll be a little bit more honest. But no, I think it's been really cool. One of the really, I think my favorite things that we've gotten to do is, we call it, the kind of phrase we use is, we get to do work in the system, but we also get invited into some conversations where we get to do some really cool work on the system as well. And what I mean by that is us going and coaching an AD or coaching an executive at this or that school is work in the system, right? We're helping that leader immediately. What's the problem of the day? What's going on? What can we help you with? Let's build your own leadership journey for you. Where do you want to be in 12 months? Not just in role, but as a person, what's the plan we're going to take? But then because of those relationships we've built, we also get to talk about conversations about like, okay, well, what are the structures you're building in your organization to help lead people and develop people, and what are some HR policies you might need to think about? So one of the coolest things we've gotten to do at some of the schools we work closely with is think about like, hey, what is the support that the organization is going to provide a first-year head coach? What are the things you're going to do to make sure you're setting them up for success? And I'm setting this up to say, I think that the answer that I would say to this question is the same I would say for a first-year head coach, is we've done that so much that we can almost tell you, hey, 8 months into the job or 10 months into the job, we can tell you what your issues are going to be. And it is going to be that the leader is going to be surprised, athletic director or coach is going to be extremely surprised by how much time they're having to spend on their staff. and how little time they're getting to spend doing the thing they feel like they were hired to do, whether it is coach their actual sport, develop players, recruit, fundraise, whatever their thing that they're best at. They're going to be frustrated by the amount of time they're spending on getting their staff aligned and on board. They're going to be way better at hiring the second time around, way better at developing those people the second time around. And so what we would say is, I think that we say trust. So when we say trust, we call it transactional trust. So can you trust that when you give someone something, they're going to do that job? They're going to do the job and they're going to do it well. And then also relational trust. Like, do you actually trust this person is like priority number one when you're putting together an executive staff. And then it is, okay, how do I put together a group of people that complements my strengths as an AD and allows me, we call it 70-30. So we want to help fight for an AD to be spending 70% of their time doing the things that they are a lead at. And then there's 30% of every single job, every AD job that you have to do that you don't always like to do, but it's just part of it. So we think that perfect balance is at 70-30. So it's trust first. I mean, can you trust these people that you're hiring to be put around you? And then the second thing is, how do you position the skill set? How do you look for the skill set to put an executive team around you that allows you to be at that 70-30 so that you're not at 50-50 or lower most of the time, having to constantly put out fires? Is it possible? Maybe not. I don't know. A lot of ADs, I think, would challenge us and say it's idealistic. But to Kevin's point about how important alignment is with that staff, I think, yeah, like when we sit with ADs we get to serve, I think that if anything is going to get you, it is going to be toxicity, disunity, not having alignment at that executive staff level. And so that should be priority number one of who's the people that I'm leading and pouring into and making sure we're aligned. It's that group. And then everything else kind of comes downstream of that.
You guys both hit on several of the themes I hear most often when talking to ADs in this space. The first thing I typically hear is that time management piece, just the way things speed up and the demands for their time and trying to stop and figure out how to be strategic with it. The second is often just the speed and the weight of decision making. I experienced this myself as a young athletic director. Up until the moment I became an AD, I had all the answers. And then the moment all those decisions rested with me, it felt a whole lot different. And I'm so grateful for that humbling experience because it made me a much more empathetic leader, particularly when managing up, to have a better understanding of what those decisions look like and feel like when the buck stops with you. And that leads to the third theme that I hear, which is that leadership is lonely, right? I hear this often when talking to athletic directors. And so I want to touch on that with you guys. How important is it for leaders to build community and have resources and people that they can lean on, that can equip them and hold them accountable as they continue to grow and mature as individuals while carrying so much?
Massive. And we know this, yet we still ignore it. And we just give into the stress of the job. We often we have these kind of 4 pillars of performance that we look at. One of them is relationships. And it's, you have to have people that you are connected to, and could be people in your program, but also people outside of your program, whether that's family, peers, people who understand the role that you're in, and people who don't, right? Because people who don't need anything from you, they just friends that you've had for life. Now, we also all know that in college sports, it's a lifestyle. So most of your friends are going to be people in the industry, not people just in your community. But I think having, it is such a high demand on athletic directors, because it's an always on job. Whether we want it to be or not, there's always something going on, especially the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, this industry has gone through such massive shifts. And so you're always feeling the pressure. And if you have nobody to talk to, that pressure eventually just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And it's going to take you out at some point. And so if you're not taking care of your physical health and your relational health, it's going to impact you. And so that doesn't mean you're sitting around the campfire, kumbaya, holding hands, singing songs with people, but it's just having people that you can check in with on a consistent basis. Again, Seth, we always talk about systems, but having a system for checking in with people, because you just get busy and you forget. It's not that you don't care about people, you just get busy. And so you have to be intentional to invest in relationships and with people, again, that you don't necessarily need anything from, and they don't need anything from you, but at some point, one of you might. And so that you don't want to reach out to someone when you've not talked to them in 10 years, like, hey, I'm in a bad spot, I'm stuck. still do it. It's better than doing nothing, but it's much easier if you've been in a relationship and they already know. And we're going to need those people in our lives, and we're going to need to be those people for others at some point in time. And so I think just being consistent with relationship, again, even a text, a weekly phone call, monthly phone call, just something small, doesn't have to take up hours of your week, but something where you are staying relationally connected, just to give you a healthier perspective, keeps your energy high, keeps you from burning out, and it helps you remember why you're doing the job, that the job is not an identity.
To piggyback on what Kevin said, I think it's when you actually look at, we all know relationships is really important. We all know that community is really important. There's not an AD who would sit on this podcast or on a stage and say anything different. But I think it's one thing to know that in your head and to know it's an important idea, and then also to build it into your leadership. And so when we talk about relationships and how important they are and building a system out of it, here's one we often encourage ADs that we work with or executives we work with to instill into their leadership, which is to name and find two people. One is a peer, so someone who's in the same space as you, or at least has a level of authority, a similar level of authority in whatever organization they're in as you, so that when you reach out to them or in conversation with them, they at least know enough to be able to speak advice and wisdom. So it doesn't have to be a mentor. It can be, but some form of a peer who's in your world, gets your world enough to be able to kind of like ground you and help you when you need it. And then the second thing is a key relationship. So a key relationship can be anyone in your life, but it's the person in your life, typically an extremely old friend who, when you walk away from time with them, you feel lighter, you feel more like yourself, and there's nothing keeping you from being yourself to them. And we think that it is so important that you have consistent connection with those two people, that we will often make ADs show us on the calendar how often you're meeting with those people. We often encourage them at least once every 2 weeks for some form of, I'm talking to them. Yeah, text can be good and consistent texting can be good, but you are actually hearing each other's voices. And then also explicitly telling those people, hey, you are so important to me, and here's why you're important. Like, this is so important to me, what I'm doing, that you're so important to my health. Would it be okay with you if we set a consistent rhythm of being in contact with each other? So explicitly telling those people that they fill that role in your life. And then, because if you haven't built up that rhythm when you don't need it, you're not going to start it when you do really need it. And so the work about making sure that you're not ever getting to this place where you feel so alone and isolated that you feel stuck is to be consistently building that rhythm, so that you have it when you do need it. And then the other thing I will just add really quickly is, to your point about like not really understanding what it feels like to be in the chair, and then all of a sudden you're making the same decisions that you were in your head when you were number 2 or deputy, but it just feels so much heavier. A tool that we often use actually with athletes, and we've used it with PGA Tour pros, is this idea of balancing commitment and contentment. And so the work that we want to help an AD or a leader or a coach do on the inside of themselves as a person is to get to a place where they are we call it 10 out of 10. They are so committed to what they are doing that they are able to, they are almost borderline obsessive, but at the same time, that's not setting out of whack their level of contentment with the person that they are. And we want them to have a 10 out of 10 in terms of their contentment scale. And so what we want an AD to do is to be basically building systems in their life so they are a 10 out of 10 committed, 10 out of 10 content, because then you're able to put every single one of those decisions in a proper perspective to go, okay, this feels heavy, but is it really? Is it really to me? Is this threatening to me as a person? Is it threatening to the organization? And that's why I care so much. Like, what it helps you, it's you develop a lens to be able to view those decisions more accurately. And just like an athlete, we want them to be able to see every single shot on a golf course for what it's worth, and that it's just one shot and it doesn't predict anything about the future. Same thing for ADs. When you feel that weight start to gather on your shoulders, to put things in perspective and go, okay, well, how much does this really matter? Does this feel like a huge threat today, or is this actually threatening something longer term that I need to be, ready for? So all of these systems that we talk about, even something like developing a system of reaching out and developing those explicit relationships with people, in my mind, is all about balancing that level of commitment and contentment so that you can be the best leader that your organization and your people need.
Seth, you talked early in our conversation about identifying those core values that are going to be guideposts for your leadership. When it comes to those personal attributes or intangibles that a leader possesses, what are the themes? What are the ones you see that separate good leaders from great leaders?
It's a great question. I think I can't wait to hear Kevin's answer on this, but I think one thing is what we've talked about already, which we use a tool called Inchworm, but I'll point out one, and then which is just, I think, do they view things with what we would call a growth mindset, like that ability to put things in proper perspective with giving them the right amount of weight and being intentional with those decisions in such a way that they're not putting too much into it personally, that they're viewing it correctly. So whether, different values that we see are perspective, discipline, the kind of, there's a few names you could call it, but what I would call it is just, are they able to view things in the proper perspective and focus on the right things at the right time? I think that there's so much wisdom in avoiding being distracted than there is in trying to make sure you're focusing on the right thing. I think the ADs that are like, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I'm not being distracted by things that don't matter, more so than I'm trying to figure out what's right and what's best. So it's that level of kind of like a combination of what I would call focus and perspective. Do you put the right amount of weight on each decision because you have a perspective that allows you to play the long game and make the best decision for today? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I think, because you can go into all the things, right? They need to have a vision, be able to communicate, all those things. Yes. The skills of the job, they should care about, they should want to be growing in, they should want to be getting better at. I think I would say someone who is secure, humble, and confident. And so meaning I'm secure in who I am. I don't need to prove myself to anyone, not out of ego, not out of being better than someone. And this was me early on when I would go around and speak, whether it was on social media or doing leadership keynotes. I'm I got to be the funny guy. I got to do this. And it was an insecurity of needing their validation. And I had to get to a point to say, okay, I could get on the stage with 5,000 people or 500 people or 50 people. It could be the most amazing day of their life. And I'm going to get on a plane in 3 hours and nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows what happened in that room. It could be the worst day of their life. They could all hate every single thing that I said. I'm going to get on a plane in 3 hours. Nobody's going to know who I am. Nobody's going to know what happened. Can I be at peace with how I showed up? Just I don't need their validation. I know who I am. My job is simply to show up and not perform, but to serve and to give them what I felt like was needed in the moment and be at peace with that. And if it was wrong, then I'm going to own it. So being secure in who you are, being confident, and that's not an ego thing. You're in the chair for a reason. You've worked hard. You've prepared. I don't want to say deserve, but you deserve to be in that chair. You've done the work to be in that place. Be confident, because nobody wants to follow a leader who's constantly second guessing themselves or doubting themselves. Be confident in who you are, in your strengths and what you bring to the table, and then have humility to know you don't have it all figured out. You are bad at some things. There are some things areas you're going to need to grow in, and the same thing we would talk about with athletes. Are you coachable? Well, as an AD, are you coachable? Can you listen? Can you take feedback without getting defensive, without throwing a fit, without firing people because they pointed out a weakness, but to be able to say, yeah, that's a good point. I know I need to work on that. I appreciate you bringing that up. So to have that humility combined with being secure and being confident, I think allows a leader the ability to grow in communication and connection and all the things that the job itself requires.
We're almost out of time, but I want to ask you guys at least one more question. Both of you, I assume, have consumed a lot of leadership content through the years, and I'm sure you've run into some things that maybe didn't resonate with you, or you thought, oh, that's the opposite of what I would advise somebody to do. So just for fun, would love for you both to give me your best example of something that you've read or heard that you would say absolutely don't do that. What's the worst leadership advice that you've bumped into out there?
So I don't know if this is necessarily leadership advice, but it's used as leadership advice a lot of times. But it's the phrase, how you do anything is how you do everything. It's not true. I didn't make my bed this morning, but I worked out. I did my morning routine. So I was disciplined and intentional with my morning routine with my family. But you not everything is deserving or worthy of your absolute best attention, energy, or effort. That's just not. We would burn out by 9 o'clock in the morning if that were the case. And so I think this idea that how we do anything is how we do everything is just it's not true. It's come to Seth's point, knowing what deserves our best energy and attention and effort and leadership, and making sure we are being good stewards of our energy and effort. My second one is the oh my gosh, why am I blanking? The shopping cart in the parking lot. Well, if you don't put that up, you're a psychopath. Like, no, you're probably just busy and didn't pay attention. That doesn't mean you're the worst leader in the history of the world. And there are lots of terrible leaders who would put the shopping cart up. They just happen to notice it and put it up, but they're going to walk into their office and be a tyrant. Well, but I put that shopping cart up, so I'm a pretty good person. Well, no, you did one good thing. So I think we come up with these weird tests of like what a good leader is and what a good person is. Like, no, it's just not how it works.
You could not have asked a question that is more in like up my alley in terms of like I've joked with Kevin so many times about creating a burner Twitter account called Stuff Coaches Say. And we could totally just do Stuff ADs Say. That is just like, you hear them say it and you're like, okay, I understand that this is something that coaches say, but what on earth does this actually mean? And the players are like forced to sit there and be like, yeah, coach, but they like have no idea what the coach even means. So I'm just I don't have a specific answer. I'll throw out a couple specifics. Some of these are going to get me in trouble because they're very popular, but I would just say, be careful of any leadership cliche ever, because there are so many that all of us just say because it is said by a lot of people. And I don't know that any of us actually know what it means when the meaning behind it is really important. So like the one I'll say is control the controllables. I think I'm not saying that is not true. I think that gets said so much when people don't actually know what they're saying. They just say it because they think they're supposed to say it. So that's one. I think another one is you got to want it more. Like, what is it? What does that mean? What are you actually asking of the person when you say like, we've got to want it more? What is that like? I don't know that we know what we're saying. And so this is just a general challenge to, hey, if there's meat behind any sort of phrase that you are going to choose to say in a press conference, to your executive staff, at your all staff meetings, like just talk about the meat. You don't have to necessarily package it in this like fancy thing you can put on a shirt. That's great too. We love that, but as long as your people understand exactly what it is that you're saying. So yeah, there's my answer.
Fun stuff. Hey, Kevin, Seth, greatly appreciate the time. Really appreciate you guys engaging with CALS and being part of the CALS community. How can our audience get in touch with you guys, learn more about what the Better team is doing and can do to help support our athletic administrators in their community?
Yeah, great question. We're honored to be a part. Love the conversation. Easiest ways to find us. So the website is just bebetterleaders.com. We didn't want to fork over, $1 million for better.com in 2023. We're both on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Seth Kindig, at Kevin DeShazo. But if they go on the Better website, they can directly connect with us. They can sign up for our weekly newsletter for leaders in sports. So head to those places, find us, and happy to connect.
Awesome. Thank you both. Look forward to visiting with you again real soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to episode 15 of the CALS Report. A big thank you to Justin Moore and Fernando Lovo for joining Ryan Bradley to share how they're positioning Tulsa and New Mexico for what's coming next in college athletics, and to Kevin DeShazo and Seth Kindig for joining Ryan in the Leadership Playbook to deliver practical insight on alignment, leadership systems, and staying grounded in the chair. You can find the CALS Report on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media at 80 Symposium on X, at the CALS Report on Instagram and on LinkedIn. You can also visit us anytime at 80symposium.us for event details and more content from across the CALS community. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep leading the way in college athletics.